Yeah.
It's too hard because basically this introduction is words. Learn the words of each article journal. Learn the words of e-mix. My e-mix and both of together kind of, but I don't. I'm going to do the referencing text word notes. That's the thing. Yeah.
I don't actually know about citation.
It's pretty clear, and I think
Don't know why it wants to
stuff
speak
why
so
it's
much.
relevant, some of the stuff you
Okay, I mean,
conclusion combine how they make the stuff when you want it.
Yeah, I've read much of that, so I just need to type it
Do
out.
it Friday.
Yeah, yeah.
You've got pens. We've got pens. I have a pen, I think.
Fuck me. Check out. Oh wait, it's for 2. Yeah. So a receipt on here, iced latte, £7. But it's for 2.
That makes sense. To be fair, Starbucks, one coffee is £5.
What coffee?
Like, I don't know, the biggest size they have, like a latte.
£5
And
for
it's
that
like
shit.
two, like,
But they serve Starbucks is the worst.
And
The coffee's rank.
yeah.
Terrible. That one, where is it? That one down there, in Callahan's one. That coffee is fucking buzzing. It's they've just got a coffee filter, scraped all the shit out of it, put it back in,
So,
and it's like £3 odd. I hate this university so much. Wait for more people. Anyone else coming?
mine's not coming, she has surgery soon.
Of course she does, yeah.
And
She's still black off.
Marie,
Jay's
You might just buy yourself a whole mess of
Okay.
stick coffee.
what's Nikki doing today?
Hmm?
Nikki doing?
Peg leg. It's probably fucked some other part of her body up. That's okay. Oh yeah. It's been like, it feels like several months since the last lecture that we did on this module.
Yeah.
For some reason, it was only 2 weeks, but this is what happens with study week, and like life gets in the way. I don't even know where I am anymore. But nevertheless, I suppose we better take 5 minutes at the beginning of this, because there are 2 pertinent questions. There's a pertinent question to this lecture, first of all, which I posed via Canvas weeks ago, so we'll have to think about that. But moreover, I think more pertinent, this is the 13th of November today. Yeah?
yeah.
So you have like 3 weeks before you're submitting 50% of this module to me, right? Superb. What is the exact date? Is it the 7th of December?
First of December.
First?
Yeah.
Friday.
Holy shit.
You want to put it at 7th, I mean.
I can't do that, I'm afraid. Okay, so it's Friday the 1st of December then. Well, but that's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to marking it. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to marking it. So that means we have less time than I figured, with 2.5 weeks until you're submitting it. So now is not the time for telling too many lies. I want to know exactly where you're at.
So that's what Smarty Mama.
We'll move on from Emma until she's eaten a Smarty corner.
I haven't thought about it.
I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah. I will, but yeah.
Other things?
Yeah.
Start of the game, just trying to get to the level, but other than that, not really. Just gonna record the like half an hour worth of footage, then edit it down to 15-minute segment, then we're not think over it.
It's not a bad technique.
We're going to do it all on Saturday.
You're going to do it all on Saturday. Can I advise you don't?
I'll do
I'll try and do it all.
I'm going to advise you don't try and do it all on Saturday. You spend a little bit more time than.
I was going to send it off on Saturday. I'm just like,
I don't.
Just
I
like
want you to
crack
put
on.
more time into it than Saturday as well.
Yeah.
Doing it all on Saturday won't pay off.
It was Saturday and Sunday.
I feel like I'm saying words and they're not having any effect here, so I'm going to move swiftly on. My recommendation would be don't put a day aside to do an assignment which is worth 50% of the third year module. It doesn't help.
So I know the game, I know more or less what I'm going to do, but I can't say that I've put extreme
Okay.
energy in it for now.
For now.
I've started the game and I've edited the introduction, but that's all I've done so far really.
Okay.
It's going. I'm still trying to decide whether to do CS:GO or FIFA. But yeah.
Decide. Now.
Alright.
You don't have to tell me your decision, but I mean do it now.
I've already recorded a bit of it already, like 5 minutes.
My hero. You've just reaffirmed
That's
my faith in
done.
humanity. All sorts. Thomas.
Playing through it, just trying to work out the best parts, sort of demonstrate the points.
Okay. But you've got some footage together.
Yeah, so we've got footage, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Emma.
I've put together like a not a script, but like a bullet list of all the things I want to talk
Okay.
about. I need to figure out a different recording software because the one I was using, I think my laptop really blew up. If I'm being honest.
So you're doing something based on your laptop, yeah?
This, yeah.
Okay. What exactly are you playing?
Essence.
Can we help? Can we give some advice to Emma? We've got any suggestions for recording software?
OBS is probably the best. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's for open broadcast software.
Yeah, that's a good option to be fair.
Is that online or is it house?
It's online.
It's a free
Yeah.
piece of software as well. You could either get it through, I don't know if the Windows Store will have it. I think it does,
Yeah.
but if it doesn't, you can just go to the website and download it. And it's a pretty lightweight piece of
Yeah.
software as well. It doesn't take up much space on your hard drive, so it should be fine. It kind of looks like every other piece of recording software, right? It's not a difficult thing to use. All right, and so seeing as there are 2 weeks, in an assignment like this, it's difficult for me to actually give feedback on things, okay? Because it's a video creation, people do find it difficult. What are the useful things that I can give feedback on? Emma, I could give you feedback on the list of topics that you have, for example. You know, if you feel that you need to ask, is this the right stuff to be talking about, I can do that. If anyone's plotted something out in that way, I can give you the yes or the no on that stuff. I've already done it for Maddie because she's had to do hers basically last week because she's having an operation, which means she can't talk, so she's had to get it out of the way. So we've already corresponded on that. If you're confident with video editing and you want to send me sections to look at, that's fine as well. Okay, but so I have given feedback in that way, but let's see. Sounds like everyone's got a lot of work to do. What have you got doing this week?
I know some of us got dissertation thing, but it's 800 words, like that's not bad. We had an assignment, was it last week?
Yeah.
For what?
Richard.
Presentation?
Yeah.
Did you have to deliver it?
No, I was PowerPoint narrate.
What's that with 30%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes fast, year 3, unfortunately. Can't do anything about it. That 800 words should be straightforward.
Yeah.
Should be too.
So we don't need to include other sources, we just include the 2 sources that we're using, right? We don't have to.
Am I giving advice about the dissertation stuff now? Yes. Yes. You need to summarise the 2 sources you have selected, yeah. When's that due?
Friday.
Friday.
So I've got to mark this as well. I've got additional students now, Alice. Fuck's sake.
Yikes.
Yeah, I have one more assignment tomorrow.
Oh.
No.
Horrible.
Alright then, okay. Jem, hello.
Hi.
Where are you at with your assignment,
Um,
which is due 2 weeks on Friday?
planning. Yeah, the planning stage is
You're at the planning stage? Be further than that next week. All of you need to be a little bit further than you are this week next week, okay? Simply because managing an assignment like this in the last week, any number of things can fuck up. You all know that. Whenever it's a production-based thing, any number of things can go wrong. Please don't leave it until like 2 days before and your laptop dies. It happens every year somebody's laptop dies. Laptop death is a thing, definitely. So please don't leave it to that. Okay, on to something less pressured and stressed. Now, let me just give you one thing on to end that with. There's nobody in a position yet where it's like, oh my god, you can fail this. You can all do this in 2 weeks. It's not going to be a big deal. Okay? There's probably material today that you want to incorporate anyway when you've actually seen the material today, so it's not going to be a big deal. Everyone can do this. Everyone's got this. It's going to be fine. You're going to produce something good. I'm going to give you a good mark. Everyone's going to be happy. You're going to fill in the fucking module feedback at the end and say, yeah, I really actually enjoyed this, opposed to fucking having that sleepless nights about it. It's going to be fine. Relax. The Sims, it's going to go great. Okay? Plenty of footage of killing them in, because I like to watch
Don't
that.
kill my son.
Well, I like to watch it. Deal with the audience here, yeah? You know, I like to see them. You know, you put things on them and then they squash. I like that. That's the whole point of playing The Sims, is to kill them. You know that, right?
I didn't know you could squash Sims.
Oh yeah. Get creative. Get on YouTube. Have a look. Now, Sims is a pertinent example of the sort of games we're going to talk about today. In fact, one of the contributors to most of the lecture today is taken from one book by Catherine Spister, which is in the reading list for this week. She deals with a lot of people, including some of the designers of The Sims, and they talk about how games make us feel stuff. So, to begin this, I did ask this on the Canvas announcement a couple of weeks ago, but that was a lifetime ago. Things have happened in the interim period. Everyone's moved on. Everyone's lives have developed a richness which we can't even appreciate at this point. I want you to write down 3 games, at most, but one, if you can't think of any more, of games that have had an emotional impact on you.
Gonna be psychological damage.
That's an emotional impact, Jack. There's a lot of emotional impact out there at the moment with Fortnite. We've gone back to the OG island, and all of a sudden people who thought they'd left that behind are now screaming at screens again and yelling down their headsets, calling people motherfuckers and threatening young children with castration. Just how it should be. How Fortnite should be played. I'd like to say I'm not involved in any of this behaviour, but that would be a lie based on my activities this weekend, where I threatened a young child with coming round to his house and butchering his parents in front of him. Not my proudest moment. What we got?
FIFA.
FIFA makes you emotional.
I don't play it anymore, but yeah, I stopped it because it made me emotional.
What kind of emotion did FIFA give you?
I'd say more negative emotions than positive.
Did you get any positive emotions out of it?
I don't know, maybe not. Just a shithousery on it, and just.
It's a cesspit of pain, basically, right? You know, and the funny thing about FIFA for me is it's weird, Connor. It's like you don't actually feel good
No.
when you do win. It's
No.
more of a relief that you didn't lose.
I was the same as well. Like I'd want to go like, say I was on career mode, I would want to be like unbeaten, like the Invincibles. And if I lost the game, like that
Yeah,
was
you
it.
rage quit it. Yeah.
Yeah, start a new one.
Yeah, which means it never actually gets nobody any. I refuse to believe that anyone's ever completed a season of FIFA.
Don't think I have.
That's something done, to be honest. Okay, so FIFA, a game that emotes. Do you feel that's a deliberate design technique?
I'd say so, yeah, because I think a lot of people can relate to what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's. I think Electronic Arts are a company, and I'm sure somebody's going to mention The Sims now, which is another Electronic Arts game, right? Very different sort of game, but weirdly, there's a mechanism built into these things, which repeats across all of Electronic Arts games, which they're designed to annoy you. They're designed to get you, to make you feel an emotional attachment to something, and then really annoy you when that thing starts to go wrong. You used the word shithousery, and I feel that Electronic Arts specialise in a brand of shithousery in game design, which really should mean that they're banned, because they're out there to actually provoke this sort of thing. I'm a long-term player of a particular series by Electronic Arts, the ice hockey games NHL. I've been playing these games since 1992. So I'm now logged into my 31st year as an NHL player. I hate that company so much. I despise them, but I still keep on playing that game every year it comes out. They've sold ostensibly the same game for the last 15 years. It's not changed. The graphics have improved slightly. That's it. The control system's exactly the same. And the way that the AI in the game is designed to make you break things has never changed in that time as well. It's horrendous. Sims, they will mess you up. They will mess up your world for no reason. It's a horrible company. Do we have another example of an emotional game?
I like unpacking.
Why?
I like the character develop, so you don't actually ever meet the character, but like you can tell like the story through all the bedrooms and the rooms and flats they go into.
So, what's the kind of emotional thing that goes on here?
It depends on the class. So like at one point, like the character moves in with someone because there's like two toothbrushes in the thing, but then in like the next one, there's no longer, like they've moved into a small place again, so it's like the relationship is broken up.
That idea of being part of a life,
Yeah.
and actually being, I don't want to say observer, because it's a closer relationship than an observation. It's not like a soap opera where you observe a character over a period of time. And you might feel you have a parasocial relationship with them. It's a closer relationship that you might get than that kind of mediated relationship. I understand, yeah, that's interesting. Any more?
I'd say any competitive game. Any competitive game. Like online competitive.
Any competitive game.
Yeah.
For me, it's Counter-Strike, GTA, Call of Duty, so it's
Yeah.
competitive, online, first-person shooter.
What kind of emotions are?
Like normally rage.
Rage.
Yeah.
This isn't healthy, people. You know this, right? I mean, there's an argument to suggest that games that make you rage are healthy in terms of providing a catharsis for everyday life. I don't necessarily agree with that, because it also suggests to me that you've been made to feel rage when it wasn't really necessary at all. Do you know what I mean? This is more like, I'm indulging in a pastime which makes me angry. You have to ask serious questions about your life at that point. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I play games that make me angry. I do other things in my life that make me extremely angry. For example, you know, I'm now in the 34th season of being a season ticket holder for Swansea City Football Club. There's nothing that makes me more angry than watching that bunch of fucking losers every week. But, so my life is fun. You have options. You're still young. You know, you don't have to do this kind of thing. More. Any other games which give us an emotional response?
Minecraft gives me a lot of satisfaction.
That's a different kind of emotion. So it may be something more positive that we can tap into here, people. Explain this.
I just, obviously, on the creative one, because when you go on survival, it really gave me anxiety when there was like the zombies, because they were coming from everywhere. But when I'm on the creative mode, it really, like, you have everything. You can do anything you want, and so it just makes you be more creative and kind of, maybe at the beginning you don't give an order to what you do, but then the more you play, the more you start creating your little kind of dimension.
Interesting. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment?
Yes, I do.
There's an important thing to tap into here with emotional content of games. Because games very often have an end state, we have a directedness towards what goes on to them. The psychological term for this is called intentionality. That our actions are positioned in a particular way where we want a particular outcome. And when we achieve that, there's a sense of deep satisfaction, which is an important emotional marker. That payoff with intentionality doesn't often happen with other media, because we're not in control of it. So go and watch a movie, it sucks. Okay, you've spent money, you had the intention that you're going to go and watch something that's going to be really good. People are getting this weekend with the Marvels, right? The new Marvel movie. People are going to watch it. Guess what? It blows. I could have told you that before, and I didn't even need to go watch it, you know, because I've seen that movie 100 times before. And people are really dissatisfied. It's like, well, yeah, because it's not emotionally fulfilling as a thing to do, is to go watch the same film that you've watched 100 times before and you've done worse. Something like Minecraft, though, you set out with maybe not even a plan, but as you're going through it, you get a sense of here is something unfolding and developing. You work towards its end goal, and when you sit back and look at it afterwards, you think, nice, I'm happy with that. And there's, I guess, the key emotional word. I'm happy with that. You know, games are something which we can feel a sense of happiness in. Because if we didn't, why would we bother? Any others?
Outer Wilds.
How so?
That's more of the feeling of discovery and eureka moments in that game.
Yeah, of which it has many.
Yeah.
Yeah. RPGs like Outer Wilds often, I think, invoke a deep sense of satisfaction. I'll get into why that might be later in the lecture, in particular around the connection we feel with a particular avatar, which is very, very important, I think, in sort of gaining that sense of satisfaction and achievement in an RPG like this.
Are you thinking of Outer Worlds?
I might be.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Outer
I've
Worlds.
got Outer Wilds as well, but I've never played Outer Wilds. Come on.
Outer Wilds. I think you think of Outer Worlds as the Obsidian game.
Mm-hmm.
Outer Wilds is it's an indie game. You basically explain it. It's basically a Groundhog Day. A Groundhog Day game where you're in a little solar system in a spaceship. And you're trying to figure out what's causing this Groundhog Day scenario, and you have to discover little mysteries of what's going on. It gives you no direction. You have to figure out
It's
yourself.
the same principle as Returnal,
Yeah.
which I've played, and yeah, you don't know why these things are there, they're killing you all the time, and you have to restart all the time.
Yeah,
So
but then you discover it
Yeah.
through your own thing.
you find the MacGuffin, and yeah. Okay, that relates to that point about goal orientation and finding the big reveal, right?
Yeah.
You know, and do you have a certain amount of control in doing that, and how you go, especially, I mean, it's not a game I've played, but I've read about Outer Wilds, and I think it's the control mechanism, that you are in control of how you go about solving that mystery, which is quite important, I think. Reminds me of another really emotional game, which I respect nobody's played. Has anyone played What Became of Edith Finch? Anyone heard of it?
I've played it. I've got it through on Epic, so yeah.
Yeah. What did you make of it?
It was alright, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's
I don't know about the ending, but I did enjoy it.
it's good, right? I mean, I think the tone of it is quite emotive.
Didn't like the horror bit though, the mines.
I know what you mean. It's a bit Alan Wake, that section of it. But what is interesting about it is you feel a sense of development with how you find out more about the character,
Yeah.
and it invests you with a sense of control. Of like, I'm in charge of finding out who this person was and what happened to them.
Yeah.
You know, so a very important aspect of the emotional content of games is that notion of control. Unlike other media, we control to an extent what happens in a game, and therefore our emotional attachment to what happens in the game increases. This is not a story that's being told to us. This is a story that unfolds through our activities. So that sense of, does anyone know what the prime word is here to describe that? Before I spoil it. Agency. One of the critical parts of emotive contents of games is agency. Games afford us a sense of agency which we don't have in other media. Because of that, that closely relates to how games can make us feel things that other media simply do not. So, historically, in terms of how we've talked about games in game studies, it's kind of taken as a given that games can create a powerful role, or play a powerful role in creating empathy and other strong positive emotional experiences. Nice word here being positive. Some of the examples we've discussed about emotion in games have been negative. So it does cut both ways. But people who talk about how games don't have emotional impact of movies, I think they do, they just have a different palette. I've never felt pride or guilt watching a movie. That is Will Wright, who is the designer for Sims. When Wright set out to design Sims 4, for example, what was in his mind was to create things like pride, guilt, etc. A direct design aspect of video games is, how do we make players feel? Because if you make people feel something, an emotional state for playing, they are more likely to play. The arguments from designers is, the more we can get people emotionally invested in something, the more likely they are to engage. And that follows for all media. If a lot of you have the idea after this degree that you're going to go off and be media creators, right? Good for you. That's what kind of one of the things that we encourage, right? As you have undergone sort of practice during this degree, what you've really been learning is how not to make bland, featureless shit. But instead, invest a sense of emotional sort of maturity and emotional grasp in the work that you produce, because you know this is going to be more interesting for an audience. If you make people feel something, they are more likely to engage. Now, what's important there is how you make people feel, because for a company like Electronic Arts, they don't care how you feel. They recognise that anger, hate, etc. are strong feelings which are much easier to develop, so we'll just do that. We'll just make people feel really, really pissed off all the time, and they will continue to play. Let's forget about what the psychological and emotional damage that we might have wrought on young children who are sent into rage states all the time could be. This is why games like Fortnite are so irresponsible. So you're making like 10-year-olds angry all the time. Do you think this might have long-term effects? That they can't emotionally regulate in any way, shape or form because they're playing this game all the time. Or you could take a more positive view like Will Wright does and others do who design games of this kind. So, the actual design of games, emotion is always a part of it. Most games will try to set out to bring positive emotions to players. Not all succeed. This really tells us a huge amount about what goes into the game design process. To make a compelling video game, it's not 5 minutes work. When the big, it's going to come out next week, right? The big reveal, Grand Theft Auto 6. Grand Theft Auto 5, released in 2013, Development starts in 2008. So it was a 5-year project to get that game out. Grand Theft Auto 6 development started in 2013. This is a 10-year project. I know already that what the main aspects of that were not how to develop the game itself. Because the game just simply sits on a development engine. In this case, it'll be Unreal Engine 5. So they've actually done most of it in 4, but they're just going to import all those assets into that 5, upgrade them. You can be able to do all sorts of fancy stuff with ray shading, etc. It's going to look fantastic. I've seen some of the clips already from the Rockstar trailer, and it's like, this looks too real. My one impression so far is, nah, this isn't a good idea. If I'm going carjacking and killing people in this reality, this is going to be a bit too close to home for me. I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy killing real people. Yet. I probably will, but yeah, I've got some moral problems with this. They've taken 10 years because they're trying to develop a story here which is compelling and which is going to get people to engage in the same way they've engaged with other ones in the past. That doesn't happen by accident. This means you've got to go into a huge amount of development, not just in terms of graphics, not just in terms of gameplay, but also in terms of writing. I think one of the key things that we sort of miss is the written content of games, the narrative of how a game works. But in terms of emotional experience, those design principles usually aren't the things that develop emotional responses. We can actually look at 2 unique properties of video games which don't exist really in other media, or don't exist in the same quantity as they do in other media, as where emotional response comes from. Choice and flow. Now, I talked about flow in the lecture before, so 2 weeks ago. But choice, I guess, is the important one that we haven't discussed so far. We can choose to do things in games, or not do things. The choices are open to us. That element of choice means we have an element of control or agency over what happens in the game itself, and that develops an emotional response. So it's a really simple mechanism. The game gives you choices, you choose them, that develops your emotional attachment to the game. Classic one, I know you're going to talk about Red Dead Redemption 2. The choices we make in Red Dead Redemption 2 ostensibly mean that's how the game is going to end. Without doing spoiler alerts for anyone who's not playing it and who might want to play it in the future. But you know, it was 6 years ago, get on with the fucking program. It's been out for a while. But you know what I'm talking about, right? And it's an explicit thing in that game as well. You have that meter, you know, the honor meter, right? And other games have that kind of mechanism as well. Which means you know, the game will, you know, if you look at something that's come out this year, Starfield, for example, you know, the choices that you make in that game will dictate how that game unfolds for you. So that element of choice is where the critical difference between games and other media exists. Games offer people, you know, players a chance to influence the outcome of the action in them, and then through those efforts, we get an emotional response for it. And I guess it resonates with something like FIFA, right? For those FIFA players in the room, you know, if you play amazingly well, like everything comes off, and you hammer an opponent, yeah, that sticks, right? You feel good. You remember that. You remember giving someone a 7-0 spanking, you know? Because, yeah, it feels really, really good. Because the choices that you put into it, how you selected, how you lined up, how you actually executed everything in the game perfectly is great. I mean, that's not new in FIFA. Going back to the PlayStation 1 days, a friend and I used to play FIFA all the time, but we used to play what we called prison FIFA. So you turn off all fouls, but turn on injuries, but turn off substitutions as well. The whole purpose of it being that you cripple the other person's team. So all your players are hobbling about like old men and big, you know, stuff like that. So that was how we used to enjoy ourselves back in the late 90s. I remember that happening. 2-2, went into the last minute. One of my crippled players scored an absolute peach from outside the area. Top corner, 3-2 win. Yes, nice. That happened 24 years ago, and I still remember it to this day. It's one of my happiest memories of my entire life, was that goal. There is a, because I had a role in it. I managed to do that. That was me. It's me in it through an interface, etc. But it still feels like, oh my God, this is incredible. Now, with very rare exceptions, none of that is true for films, novels, television, etc. And actually, films, novels, television, etc. do not pull this off very well. I'll give you an example. Do we have any Black Mirror fans here? Anyone's ever watched that series? A few. Did you ever watch Bandersnatch? What do you make of it?
I thought it was pretty good.
Did you?
It was a bit lacking in
I
some
thought it was
aspects.
shit.
Did you? I did all the endings.
Do you want to know what I'm talking about, Bandersnatch? You know, this is a Black Mirror episode where you can...
Make choices?
Yeah, basically, you know, you press something on your remote control and it tells the story in that way.
Yeah, then I think I did.
You've probably seen
I
it then.
didn't like it though. If it's the one with the choices, I hated it. 'Cause
Yeah.
It just can't conclude.
Exactly. It felt really unsatisfying. It's like, I made this choice and then, okay, so I made this choice. Actually, I wouldn't tell it like that.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there thinking, I didn't want it to. Because you've given me the choice, now you've taken all of that away from me. I think maybe because it's, you know, you play video games a lot, you're used to that scenario, but you're used to then doing it how you want to do it, right? But what Bandersnatch did was like say, right, you can do one of these three things. Okay, I'm invested in this now, and then it played out and you're like, nah, that's not what I wanted. That's literally not how I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be something else. So you've given me a false choice here, right? You know, because there was only a certain way this could go. Games don't fall into that trap very often. So, what do game designers actually say? So here is our favourite rage game of all time, right? You know, this is, I think that's FIFA 20. Emotions in games are linked to particular pleasures offered by the concept of staged pretense. So, in a game system, games are finite. Okay, any given game is a finite system. You might be able to develop a game in a particular way which makes it feel infinite in some ways. So people, last year somebody said, what about No Man's Sky? It's a game. You may not be familiar with No Man's Sky, but it's like this vast open world environment where you can fly about in your spaceship and go to different worlds, and in theory there are an infinite number of worlds and you can explore to your heart's content, etc., etc. There is no such thing as an infinite video game. There are corners around that. It might be staged in a way which makes it feel vast, but that does not mean it's infinite. That feeling of the infinite void that you're flying through is a staged pretense. Okay? It's a pretense that this is vast and huge. Like, again, Red Dead Redemption 2, vast open world. Do you know what? Actually, if you think about it, it's tiny little space. If that was like a physical world, that'd be the size of like Morriston. Do you know what I mean? Because like you can ride a horse from one side to the other in like 35 minutes. That's not that far. That's really not that far distance-wise. It's like the map of Grand Theft Auto 5. That city would only have about 3,000 inhabitants. It's tiny. You know, you can drive all the way across it from like in like 10 minutes. It's like, you know, it'd be a really small space if it was an actual physical space. So there's a staged pretense here. You know, this is how it is. Staged pretenses, this idea that things can be in a certain way, is how a limited finite system like a game allows you to develop a sense of scope and being invested in that space. Now, in terms of game design, there's another element to stage pretense. Game systems actually work to elicit emotions from players and lead them to predict their and other players' future emotions during the game. Something like FIFA works heavily on this principle. It's not just about putting a game together. Actually, the game does what we call framing. It frames how you should feel. So right from the outset, this can be like the paratextual elements of the game, how the game is advertised, how the game is marketed. It is all out there to make you emotionally responsive in a particular way. And then that allows you to be able to predict how you will feel playing the game. So, Emma, if you approach The Sims, right, you don't approach it with a feeling of dread, do you? This is going to be nice. There's going to be a space where you can actually have some time to enjoy, right? Whereas FIFA is not really approached in that way, right? This is a space to undergo some kind of fight, battle, combat, you know, take somebody down, beat the AI, you know, but it's beat. You know, it's that combative sense. So for Jarvinen, it's the notion of how we deal with emotions begins right at the beginning. How are you going to approach the game itself? Before you've even picked up the controller, what is the emotional sense of how this is going to be played? You play a horror game, you have an expectation of what's going to unfold in terms of that game itself, in terms of its emotional content. So why I find Fortnite an interesting example, because if you look at all the paratextual elements of Fortnite, it looks fun, it looks kind of cute, cuddly, and you know, something which, oh, this should be a fun. It's not fun. You can't have fun playing that game. Nobody has ever had fun playing that game. And even if you win, it's not a fun experience. It's a very tense experience until you get an outburst of joy because you've managed to beat a bunch of 8-year-olds. When you actually realise what you've done, you think, this isn't an accomplishment at all. Let's do it again. So, anyone know this game? Picture? You played it? What do you make of it?
I don't know why I played it. Only recently I played it, but
Do you want to explain to everyone what it is?
Brexit, is it? For in context?
Well,
No,
I think more serious than that. So the game is called Papers, Please. If anyone wants to give this a go, it's a fairly light thing, and you know, maybe not in terms of content, but in terms of playing it, it doesn't, you know, to play through it doesn't take very long. For example, it's fairly straightforward. Explain what you have to do, Connor.
So they come into this country. There's like they might be. Basically, you let people into your country or let people out of the country, and then there's sort of like tasks where it's like, all right, there's like terrorists or something in the neighbouring country, don't let them in.
Yeah.
And then you've got to like look through their passports or look through they got to provide documentation, and then there's little intricate things like that red little square. Like if you miss stuff like that, you get sort of penalised, and then you get less money, and you have a family, and then if you don't have money for your family, they sort of die off, and yeah.
Yeah, but and in this as well, it encourages you to think of, like, you know, you deny entry to these people because you think they might be terrorists, and then they die because, like, you know, they're starving, whatever, or they're being persecuted or whatever. There's outcomes to it. So the game is about being a immigration officer, effectively, and you get all these literally papers. You ask like papers, please, for each other, and you make immigration decisions. I think the purpose of the game is, one, to try and put you in the position of what this person has to do, you know, which is a really difficult job for somebody to do. You basically sat there every day and saying, like, somebody comes towards me, I'm going to make a decision that's going to transform their life. And there are consequences which are far bigger even than that decision. You know, if I let this person in, am I putting a lot of people in this country in the position now that they might get killed, you know, because this person could be a terrorist? Or if I deny this person, am I sending them back to their home country where they're going to be tortured, you know, and then the rest of their family gets taken into imprisonment, etc., etc. Okay, heavy stuff. Of course, there are no actual payoffs for this. You can play the game, and you know, your family doesn't actually die. You know, if you do badly, you know,
I thought I was doing all right, but
then your wife is dead.
Yeah.
I thought I was doing fine. I'm a kid stuff. So yeah, and okay, but that's not happening to you in real life. Okay, so there is a sort of response to this, which is like, ah, shit. You know, I suck at being. You didn't go out and try to join the border force or anything like that after playing this, right? The game is an attempt to get you to empathise with what the consequences of this are. Now, the game is a response to the mass media. The mass media in many countries makes very glib and sort of immediate statements about immigration. So we must stop all immigrants. We must get the numbers of immigrants down to like whatever arbitrary figure is picked out of the sky, right? To do that means you have consequential actions going on which will fundamentally alter not just some people's lives, but thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's lives. Often for the worse, sometimes for the better, you know, depending on what it is. But if you make the wrong decisions about who you let in, it could be very bad. And those people who are involved in actually, not the people who spout about it in newspapers, but the people who actually have to make those decisions on a daily basis aren't thought about. So if a politician comes out and says, we should not let any more immigrants into this country, or just these people, well, they're not the ones sitting in an immigration office making those decisions. There's the people who are just trying to get you in a position of who this is. So it's it's an interesting sort of game. Now it kind of follows Sid Meier's idea of what a good game is. A good game is a series of interesting choices. A game like this tries to embed the choices as the mechanism by which you feel emotional content. You are given a lot of interesting choices in Papers, Please. As in who should we trust, who is who's deserving of this new life that we can offer them. If you have actions which actually have consequences, that sort of unlocks a new series of emotional responses. And it's quite an emotional game. You can play it hard and then you realise, oh shit, I've just done that, and that's not so good. And that doesn't make me feel good as a person, because it's grounded perhaps in a more realistic thing. It's like, something like Red Dead Redemption 2. I usually played it in a quite moral way, but then all of a sudden I'll get bored and I will like hog tie a child and put them on a railway track and watch them get run over. And that's fine. There's no consequences really for that. My meter goes down a little bit. It's like, I'll do something nice to get that back up. I've still murdered a child, effectively, right? In a horrendous way, but there's no real emotional payoff of me doing that. Something like this, I think, is more grounded in a realistic scenario, and therefore it has a really interesting way of doing this. Now, our feelings in everyday life are therefore integrated into this. Now, I obviously have a set of feelings about immigration. Right? I'm a human being. I'm politically active. I'm politically involved. Because of that, I have a set of sort of emotional responses to this topic. So when I play something like this, it taps into my pre-existing beliefs about this. And games that do that tend to be more successful in terms of emotion. When we have a set of pre-existing beliefs about something, we tend to engage with that in ways. I mean, I didn't play FIFA for a long time until the Swans got to the Premier League. And then I was like, got right on it. It's like the Swans are in this now. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to go on, I'm going to beat the Swans, and I'm going to beat the shit out of it. Didn't work out that way, just like the Swans being in the Premier League didn't work out that way. But it's, but I felt like, an emotional charge of this because it resonated with something in my life, in that way. It was certainly more emotional to do that. I think I have more of an emotional response. So, when people go through a rapid and automatic set of evaluations as things happen to them about what each event might mean and for their goals and plans, when that happens in a game, that necessarily draws on our emotional responses. What games very often ask us to do is engage with a series of decisions which necessarily draw on our life experiences, which becomes part of the emotional content of the game itself. In this sense, we don't approach games neutrally. Now, again, this is not unique to games. we approach every piece of media like this. We don't approach media as a blank slate. We have a history with media, we have a history with types of media, and we have a history outside of that media as well, which comes into our reading of a text every time we approach one. It is always, we never come from nowhere to a media text. But what games can do is operationalize all of that. So instead of saying, right, I'm going to read this and I'm going to have an emotional response to that, you're going to do this. And that's where your emotional response is going to come from. We're going to tap into all of the stuff you already have. So it's this kind of appraisal process where we look, when we're embedded in a game and we're asked, I've got to do certain things here, and I'm going to, you know, I'm an active human being, I do things all the time. How does this fit into the wider context in which I exist? That sense of appraisal of what appropriate actions can and can't be in that situation, according to researchers, that's where the emotional sort of response comes from. So this is mostly research which comes out of psychological research on how people play video games. Psychologists have actually been studying this for the best part of 40 years now, about how games actually evoke emotional responses and how particular challenges lead to emotional responses. So, for example, adding events that match up to someone's in-game goals reliably induces more pride and joy in players, while adding events that block their goals leads to anger. This is almost a classic dichotomy between different types of games. Those rage games, right? FIFA, Fortnite, Call of Duty. What happens in them is basically you get a load of things that block what you want to do. The mechanism of the game itself is, right, you want to achieve something, we're going to stop you from doing that. That's basically how that game design works. Any sort of combative game like that, you set out to achieve something, and then you are stopped from achieving it. And that's where the rage bit comes in. Right? That is why we cuss out kids all the time. And we all do it. And that's half the fun. But the reason why we do it is because we have a plan and they're getting in the way of us executing the plan. So that's one type, if you like, of negative game design. Positive game design is where you actually develop and create experiences which allow you to progress, to allow you to actually improve, allow you to achieve and allow you to move forwards with the game. That reliably, according to research, improves people's experience of the game itself. What were you going to ask?
I have a tangent, because I have
no tangents, there's a lot to get through. So, researchers can observe the traces of meaningful choices in the brain activity of gamers. So this is actually quite a famous game and piece of research about a lot of stuff these days on brain imaging, which I find very odd, because brain imaging as a technique isn't really great, because that implies that we know what happens in the brain. And as the history of psychology as a subject shows, we have no idea what happens in the brain whatsoever. So it's limited on what we can say about this, but actually what you can do with brain imaging is see arousal levels in the brain. That's a very reliable thing that you can do here. And these Cole et al. Created an experiment which some participants played a game and others watched a live video stream of people playing. Researchers used fMRI stuff to get a glimpse of everyone's brain activity. The active gamers showed more activation of reward-related mesolimbic neural circuits, basically arousal levels. There were more neurons firing off. There was more neurotransmitter production in those players, people who were actually playing games in the areas of the brain which is usually associated with motivation and reward, which is usually part of the sort of limbic system, the top of the limbic system. You want an example is that bit at the back of your brain there. Then those who watched passively. Interacting with the game shifted the emotional patterns observed in the players' brains. So to play a game is to receive more motivation, to feel more reward than actually sitting and watching the game. But interestingly, and this relates to people who are interested in Twitch as a platform, even watching a game
It's mad. There's so many people that watch these like Twitch streamers
Yeah.
like all day, every day, thousands of people.
I think it kind of makes sense from this level of research because you feel an investedness in that person achieving and moving forwards and managing to get something done. I kind of get it, but it doesn't resonate with me as something that I like to do. I've tried to engage with like Twitch on this level, and it's just like, I get bored. I don't care. I want to do it myself rather than watch somebody else do it, you know? So yeah, it's kind of interesting like that. We need to take a break. Let's take 5 minutes. So I'm on to the flow bit. So.
Well, I would say some players, like, you don't have the money for the equipment or they suck and they want to see others play better.
That's a different motivation, right?
Yeah.
Because that's trying to improve. So you're watching somebody perhaps play the game that you want to play, but you're trying to improve in some way. But there's a lot of people who don't do that. A lot of people watch stuff on Twitch and they have no intention of ever playing that game.